All right, let's get right into it. We're tackling a homeowner's absolute worst nightmare, the wet basement. And forget about temporary patches or quick fixes. Today, we are going all in on the one, true, permanent solution: exterior foundation waterproofing.
You know the feeling, right? It's pouring rain outside, and all you can think about is what's happening downstairs. You go check, and yep, there's that damp spot again. Or worse, a puddle. It's so frustrating, and it happens to so many people.
And here's the thing. The water isn't always coming from where you'd expect. A lot of the time, as the folks at Apple Drain show, it's not a window well or a high crack. The water is actually being forced up from below, right at the base of your foundation, wrecking your floors, your walls, everything.
So how do we stop this thing for good? Here's our game plan. We'll start by digging into the problem itself. Then, we'll define what a real fix actually looks like. After that, we'll walk through the 3 big steps: excavation, sealing the wall, and installing drainage. And by the end, you'll see how it all leads to a foundation that is finally, permanently dry.
You know, to really beat the problem, you've got to understand the enemy. And in this case, it's not just the rain you see. Oh no, it's the water you don't see. The water that's constantly lurking in the ground right outside your house.
Your foundation is basically fighting a war on 2 fronts. You've got surface water, rain and runoff soaking down from above. But the real monster is something called hydrostatic pressure. That's the weight and force of all the saturated soil, the groundwater, pushing sideways and upwards on your basement walls 24/7.
So where's the weak link in the armor? It's right here. It's called the cold joint. Think of it as the seam where the vertical foundation wall sits on top of the concrete footing it was built on. Foundation pro Jake Bruton calls this the #1 superhighway for water to get into your basement. Okay, so how do we defend that cold joint in the wall? The answer is true waterproofing. And I really have to emphasize the word true, because you'll see a lot of black coatings on foundations. And believe me, they are not all created equal. This is a huge deal.
So on one side, you have damp proofing. It's basically a thin, cheap coat of asphalt. It might stop a little bit of moisture, like vapor, but it is totally useless against an actual leak. On the other side, you have waterproofing. This is the real deal: a thick, rubbery, elastic membrane that physically stops liquid water, and, this is the most important part, it can actually stretch and cover any cracks that form in the concrete over time.
And don't just take my word for it. Tim Carter from Ask the Builder puts it perfectly. Concrete is gonna crack. It's just a fact of life. And when it does, damp proofing does absolutely nothing. That water's coming right through. But real waterproofing, it's literally designed for that. It just stretches over the crack and keeps on working. Okay, so we know the problem. We know the solution we need. Now for the sweat equity. Look, there's just no way around this. To do this job right, you have to dig. I'm talking about a trench all the way around your house, exposing that entire foundation wall, right down to the bottom, down to the footing. And listen, the prep work here is everything. It's just as important as the waterproofing itself. Once that wall is exposed, it has got to be spotless. Scrape it down, hit it with a pressure washer, get all that dirt off. Next, you got to knock off any little concrete burrs or metal ties that might be sticking out from the original pour. And finally, you patch any big cracks with a good cement mix to make sure you have a nice, smooth surface to work with.
With the wall totally prepped, it's finally time to build that barrier. This is the heart and soul of the whole operation. These are the layers that are going to physically stop water from ever even touching your foundation again.
Now you've got a few ways to get that waterproofing membrane on the wall. If you're doing it yourself, there are some great roll-on liquid rubber products out there. The pros, well, they might use a heavy-duty trowel-on system that has a reinforcing fabric or even a hot spray-applied membrane that gives you a perfect coat really fast.
But you know what? It doesn't matter how it gets on there. The goal is exactly the same: a seamless, one-piece coating. The team at RCC Waterproofing has a great way of describing it. It's like wrapping your house with an elastic band. It has to be continuous, with absolutely 0 gaps to work.
Okay, once that membrane is on and cured, we add the next layer of defense. It's called a dimple mat, and this thing is a game changer. Jake Bruton calls it a rain screen for your foundation. Those little dimples create an air gap, which does 2 incredible things. First, it takes all that hydrostatic pressure off the wall, and second, it creates a perfect, clear channel for any water to just fall straight down, right to the drainage system. And that brings us to our final step:
We've sealed the wall, we've given the water a super highway to flow down, but now we have to actually collect that water and get it away from the house for good. That is the job of what's called a weeping tile, or a footing drain. Now, this might be the single most misunderstood part of this entire process. Where you put this pipe isn't just important, it is absolutely critical to whether the whole system works or fails. So, where does it go?
Okay, listen up because this is the key to everything. As Jake Brunton makes crystal clear, that pipe has to sit next to the footing, and at least part of it needs to be below the top of that footing. Why? Because you're not just trying to catch rain from above, you are trying to intercept groundwater that is rising up before it ever has a chance to hit that vulnerable cold joint. So many people put the pipe on top of the footing, and that is a massive mistake.
The absolute best way to build this drain is with what I like to call the burrito wrap. You take your perforated pipe, lay it in a nice bed of clean gravel, then you cover it with even more gravel. Then you wrap that whole thing, the pipe and all the gravel, in a special filter fabric. That fabric wrap is essential. It keeps all the dirt and silt out, so your pipe never clogs and it can keep working for decades. So once the burrito collects all that water, it's got to go somewhere, right? It all flows to a discharge point. If your yard has a good slope, it can just drain out to what's called daylight, far away from the house. If your yard is flat, it all drains into a sump pit in your basement, where a pump will automatically shoot it out and away.
So, let's step back for a second. We've dug the trench, we've cleaned the wall, we've put on the seal, and we've installed that beautiful drain. Let's just quickly recap how all these pieces fit together to create a foundation that is basically bulletproof.
It all comes down to these three non-negotiable phases. First, you have to excavate and prep that wall like your life depends on it. Second, you seal it tight with a real flexible waterproofing membrane and a drainage board. And third, you drain all the water away with a weeping tile system that is placed in exactly the right spot. See, none of these steps is a silver bullet on its own. It's the combination, the system working together, that creates this total defense. It relieves the pressure, it blocks the moisture, and it carries the threat away. And that is how you get permanent peace of mind and get your basement back for good. And just like that, you have the complete guide. This system turns your foundation into a fortress, protecting it from all that nasty groundwater. But that does leave one last, pretty important question. Your foundation is safe from the ground for sure, but what about all the water that falls from the sky? Because this is just one piece of a bigger water management puzzle, which leads us right into gutters and grading. But hey, that's a story for another day.